Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And on that note, let me get my little banner showing. There we go. Now, basically what I want to do today is continue working on Express, since this we've done for the last two live streams. But now what I want to do is focus on views, okay? Because basically when you're working in the back end, you follow a pattern called Model Views Controller, MVC. So models are generally your database, sort of like, okay, how you store data in the database, how does the data look like? Views are sort of the templates that show how the information is going to look like to the end user, which is what we're going to focus on today. And then controller are your routes. Okay, and your routes, what they do is they'll use your models, pull information from your models, and then send them over to the right view, the right template, and then that's what gets sent back as a response to the user. Okay, because again, this is all, the back end is all about request and response, request and response. So you guys get the idea. So what a view engine is when it comes to Express, it's just how you handle your views. There's a whole bunch of them. So in this video, we're going to show you a couple of different ones, but they generally all work around the same premise. So in your project folder, so I'm working out of the same Intro to Express folder that I've been working out of. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to make a folder called views. Okay, all the Express views engines by default will look for this views folder, and they're going to look for the files that you direct them to in there. So it's just the natural behavior. It's just how Express was created. So by default, it looks in that folder. Some of them are going to be like, some of them work pretty much right out of the box. So we'll try one of those first, like EJS. So I'm going to open up this particular folder in terminal. Okay. npm I EJS, which stands for embedded JavaScript. Basically what it does, it just allows you to do JavaScript in your HTML files or JavaScript templating. And generally, most templating languages for most backend frameworks all pretty much work very similar to EJS. So basically like Jinja and Python is pretty much the same idea, except you're using Python instead of JavaScript. Same thing with like Blade in PHP. I forget what they call it in when you use like Buffalo in Go. Pretty much it's always kind of the same principle. You're going to have some sort of syntax that escapes the HTML, in which you can then use the language to interject data. Okay, so EJS is installed. So EJS will be the first one. We're going to test out a few of them just so you can see how each one works. So the first thing you got to do is you got to go configure your server to know that EJS, although if I remember correctly, you don't actually need to configure anything for EJS. For EJS, you can actually just start building your routes. So basically, let's take a look at our root route and let's change that. Now, how does this change? So again, this is currently our root route right here. So right now we're just sending back the words hello world. Let's send back an actual page. So instead we're gonna render a page. So it's res.render is the function. And this function takes two arguments. The first argument is which file to look for. So we're gonna say index.ejs, because that's the file extension for EJS files. And because you're using an EJS file and we have EJS installed, it's automatically gonna know, oh, use EJS. Okay, so we will use that. Okay, and then we can send data to that template. So whatever data we want. So usually what you would do is that if you had a database, before this line of code, you would go get the data from your database here, and then you would send that data over to your template. So that's kind of like models controllers. Okay, so the controller is this route. You'll access the database, that's your model, and then you'll send it over to your template, that's your view. So here we're just going to hard code some data. So I'm just going to say, what you do is you send an object with your data. So the second argument is an object, and we're going to say there's a piece of data called, hello, and all it is a string called hello world. Okay, so that's the only data we're sending over to this template. Okay, save. So now let's go to our views folder, and I can make a new file called index.ejs. Okay, and then this just takes my normal HTML boilerplate. Oh, there we go, good. Okay. Now, and then basically EJS, So let's do H1. If I want to use JavaScript in EJS, all I have to do is I do a caret percentage sign. And since I'm going to actually print something to the screen, so basically it's always this in principle. Okay, it's always like that's. But if I'm actually going to do something that results in printing something to the screen, I have to add an equal sign here in the beginning. Okay, but then I go here, and since we passed in a piece of data called hello, I can now access hello here. To say hello, we're gonna put hello there, and then that should show hello world as an H1. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run our server. So again, we made a script, npm run dev, run Notamon on index.js. Good. Okay, and then we're gonna head over to, okay, there's the port issue. Okay, so when you see this particular error, e address in use, that means the port is currently being used, which means I probably have a server I didn't shut down from before. So I'm gonna kill this server. I have a command for this. Okay. A little notepad where I save all these commands. Okay, Control-Shift-V. So this is just gonna kill this particular port. Okay, so I'll give you a second to look at that in case you want to use that command for yourself or have it stashed away for when you run into this issue. Put in my sudo password. And there we go. The port should be closed. So now when I type in npm run dev, I should be good to go. And it's working. Okay, so now let's head over to Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer. Not Internet Explorer. What am I thinking? Internet Explorer. Oof. Chrome. Okay. Set over there. Now what I want to do is head over to localhost 3000. And see, we get that hello world from the index.ejs. Okay. And just to confirm that it's this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a style property, color, adding that into the H1 tag, which you can't see right now. But that way, when I refresh this, it should change to green. And there you go. So we know it's that EJS file where that's coming from. Okay, notice I never wrote hello world. I never wrote hello world in that actual in that HTML file. Okay, what I wrote was just this. And that's how templating languages work. They give you a way to interject your JavaScript data from your server into your template or whatever language. Again, back-end work can be done in any language, which is different than front-end work, which can only use JavaScript. Okay, so that's neat, but it's not the only templating engine. It's not the only one. Okay, and that's, I mean, EJS is a pretty simple one because you can just literally just use, basically you just use these percentage caret things, and you can just do JavaScript. So literally you could just do like for loops, whatever you want. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go into the extent of EJS. You can just read the documentation. I'm just kind of giving you a tour of different view engines. A couple of the other popular ones are Handlebars. So let's go actually look up Handlebars next. So I don't think I did use Handlebars once, I think. So Handlebars Express. I just want to make sure I find the right library and all that stuff. Okay. So I'm going to kill the server here. Okay. We'll learn together. Okay, let's see. Where's installation? Okay. So if we're going to use Handlebars, which is another templating library, you would type in npm install express handlebars. Okay. Cool. Again, I'm just reading this straight from the documentation. Okay, and then we're going to need to set the view engine. So for this one, we're going to have to explicitly set the view engine. So we're going to go to our middleware, and we have to add these 2 lines of code. Well, first we have to bring in handlebars. So let me do that. const handlebars equals require express handlebars. Here in the view engine, first we have to specify what engine we're using. This just helps, this function here just specifies the view engine. Okay, and we're going to say, hey, it's called handlebars, so that way it knows what to look for. Handlebars. Well, that's the file extension. This is the first, that's what the first argument is. So it's going to look for files that have the word handlebars at the end. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay, and then the second thing is basically the view engine that gets invoked. So that's just going to be handlebars function, because that's what we called it up here. Just depends on what you call it up there. Okay, and then app.set. Okay, and again, we're saying, hey, we have a view engine we want to set. So basically here you're creating an engine. Okay, so just to kind of specify, here we're creating the engine. And then here we're specifying which engine is used as the view engine. Okay, it's just express configuration. It's not important that you kind of know what's going on. It's just, this is just configuration. But again, just so you can understand what we're doing, here we create an engine. And then here we're setting this particular engine, setting the view engine to the engine we just created with the name handlebars. Okay, cool. So that is set. Save. Okay, and then what we want to do is now change that index. So instead of it being index.ejs, and then when you actually specify the view engine, you don't actually have to specify the file type. So we can just change this to index. Save. So that's going to be the same thing. It's just rendering a file called index and sending in the data hello world. But now I want to rename this EJS file and rename it a handlebars file. Okay, let me just make sure yep. So this becomes rename index.handlebars. Okay. And how does handlebars work? Okay, if I want to use that home variable, the only difference is that instead of using this here, okay, this well, some people refer to it like a squid wizard hat or whatever, but it's just basically a print caret percentage sign. Instead of using that, you're going to use brackets, 3 brackets. Okay, so essentially it's going to look like this. Okay, that's how it should look like for handlebars. It does the same thing. It's going to print the variable hello. Okay, so now if I save this, let's restart our server and just double check that it all works. npm run dev. Oh, there's that whole port thing again. Boo. Now let's switch screens back to Chrome. Okay, now we're back in the screen. Now when I refresh, nothing should change. Oh, it's complaining. Let's see here. Intro to Express, views, layouts. Oh, okay, so it wants me to have a file down here called intro to Express, views, layouts, main.handlebars. Let me see why do I have to make that file? I see what it wants me to do, I just want to know why. So let me read it. The views and just use sensible default, expressway, layouts, main.handlebars. Okay. But why do I have to create a main? Two. Engine. Well, not sure why, but we will do what it says. So I'm going to go back to my views folder and I'm going to make a folder called layouts. New folder called layouts. And I'm going to create a file called, I'm going to just copy that file, paste into layouts, and rename it main.handlebars. You can see why. Okay, so now that I've added that file, back to Google Chrome, let me refresh. That works. Now the question is, which one is it reading? So let me go back to index. I'm going to change the color of the one inside the layouts folder to red, so I know which one's being displayed on the screen. If it stays green, then it's working the way I think it should work. And if it turns red, it's reading the other file for some reason. It turns red. So even though I said index in the route, it wants to pull from the main. Interesting. Now why? Let's go take a look at the docs. Okay, so I'm going to go move these docs over to the Chrome you're looking at. Okay, so we can look at this together. Okay. So what we're trying to figure out is why the view engine uses sensible defaults. It leverages the expressway. I get that. So it wants you to set it up like this: home.handlebars, layouts, main.handlebars. Expressway, the way the handlebars view, engine using package. The main layout is the HTML page wrapper, which can be used for different views of the app. Is used as a placeholder for where the main content should be rendered. Okay. Home view will be rendered into the layouts. Okay, another way to use this view engine is to create instances of Express handlebars through the API. Okay, so we gotta set it up this way. That's why. Render. Okay, so there's some other features here. Okay, so by default, if you set it up the way we set it up, it's going to look for a layouts folder with a main.handlebars. So that's a thing again. But you guys saw that to do stuff in handlebars, it's 3 curly brackets. That's the main point. We'll move on to Mustache because I don't want to spend too much time on one of these because there's a few of these I want to hit up. So let's go look up Mustache. Mustache Express. Okay, which is another similar, and again, usually here handlebars, mustaches, referring to the curly brackets. Okay, so here we go. So we need to install this library, Mustache Express. So let me head over back to Visual Studio Code and we'll configure our app for Mustache. Okay, so let's just open up a separate, I'll kill this. I know I'm gonna have to Control C. Might as well just kill that port now. Sure, whatever. Then I want to do an npm I, and the thing I need to install is Mustache Express. Mustache Express. Okay, let that install for a second. Copy over the code to configure it. Okay, so now we're no longer going to be using handlebars. So I'm going to get rid of the line for handlebars. Okay, and then here's the this is going to be the code in order to configure the middleware. So I'm going to replace the handlebars middleware with the Mustache middleware. Okay, so there it is. It's configured. Save. And this is all in the documentation. So now let's configure the file. Okay, let's see. How do we do a route? Oh, really? Doesn't give me any more information than that? Okay. Wonderful. Let's see here. Head over to the GitHub repository. Maybe there we'll find some more information. Let's use Mustache and Express, at least version 3 together, including auto-loading partials. That's all fun and good. Okay. Let's see here. I just want to see what the file extension is. Okay, so the file extension is Mustache. And in this situation, it's 2 handlebars. Let me just take a look more at the files here in this GitHub repo, just to be 100% sure that I see what I'm seeing. Okay. Yep, 2. So technically, if I go back to my route, should keep that index, that hello, but now I'm going to go back to this index file here, and I need to change this to index.mustache. Okay. And then in this case, it's 2 curly brackets. Otherwise, everything else is the same for the most. Well, I'm sure there's other features that are different. I'm not going to go through every feature of it. I just want to kind of show you the different slight changes in syntax from. So let's go back to Chrome. And we'll make sure that this is actually working. Refresh. And yep, that switched. So that turned the green. So just basically the way that worked is just kind of like EJS, where I wrote index and it looks in the views folder for the index. In this case, the index.mustache. And to interpolate there, I use 2 curly brackets. So just to compare, in EJS, I use the caret and the percentage sign. In Handlebars, I used 3 curly brackets. And then in Mustache, I used 2 curly brackets. I'll show you one more. Express React views. Actually, that one I don't need to go look up. That I have the boilerplate over here. So let's head back to Visual Studio Code. Express React views allows you to pretty much use React from the back end. Typically, React is a front-end framework. Not a bad way to get used to working with React. So let me just copy over that from my other project over here. So let me go over to server.js and copy over the middleware for it. This right here is what I want. Similar to the ones we just on the last 2, where you're setting up an engine and configuring a view folder and all that fun stuff. So I'm just going to close this. I need to install Express React Views. So npm I Express React. Nope. It's all one word. Express React Views. Okay, let that do its thing. This one's probably going to be the most different, because you're using React, which is kind of a very different way to be constructing your website. So that's going to take a second to install. Meanwhile, we can start putting in the boilerplate in our middleware. So I'm going to replace the Mustache middleware. So again, Mustache, kind of like Handlebars, they created an engine, then we set the view engine to Mustache, and here we're just saying, hey, what's that views folder? So by default, it looks in views, but you could specify to a different folder if you wanted to using that code. Okay. So I am going to replace that. Actually, I'm going to replace all this. with this, which is the same thing except for Express React views. Okay. Okie dokie. And let me actually just refer to that other file one more time. Did I actually bring in Express React View somewhere here? No, I didn't. Okay, so the only time it refers to it is over here. Oh, because I did the require right there. Sure. Okay, so essentially what happens here is we are specifying our views folder. We are going to set our engine to an engine called JSX, and then we are actually creating that JSX engine, even though we did it backwards there compared to the other two. It doesn't matter as long as both get done before you run anything. Okay, so that's there. That does the thing. That's going to set the view engine to Express React views. So we can get rid of this reference to Mustache now. Save. And then what we're going to do is we now can convert our index route. So right now our index route was looking for a Mustache file. Now it's going to be looking for a JSX file because React uses what's called JSX. It's a different way of writing a website. Okay, so I'm still going to send it that variable called hello. Okay, but I'm going to go to my index now, and I have to do this quite differently. Oh, and actually, I have to also install React. So npm I React and React DOM. It's a React DOM. It has to install those two libraries for me. I forgot about that. So it's which are sizable. Okay. So it's going to do that. It's going to take a second. Well, let's go back over here. Back to my, let's close all this. Close all this. Okay. So I'm going to rename our index file. Rename to, no, not that file. This file. Because again, it's looking inside your views folder. Index.jsx. So delete the mustache. Okay. And I'm going to delete all this HTML because it's just not how JSX is written. So first thing I have to do is I have to bring in React. Because basically what Express Views does, it allows you to do all the React rendering from the back end and then ship off the rendered code. It's just the rendered HTML. So instead of React processing everything in the browser and taking a bunch of your JSX and turning it into HTML on the fly in the front end, it's doing it in the back end and then spitting out a complete HTML, CSS, JavaScript file. Okay, so that's the difference. Always the difference between server-side rendering and browser side, client-side rendering. So when you're using Vue, Angular, or React on the client side, it's doing all that sort of translation on the user's computer. So that way it loads up faster initially. While here, it does all that for you, but then there's really little processing being done on the front end, which has its benefits as well. So at the end of the day, usually you end up using a mix of the two to get the right user experience. Let's see here. Okay, how would I do this? So first I got to bring in React. So const React equals require React because we installed React. Okay, and then we're going to recreate just two different ways to do this. So we can do it as a class. So we can do class index equals class index extends React.component. So you're getting a class. And then what happens, that class is going to have a function called render that you're going to override. Okay, because again, you're extending it, so we don't see it, but technically the parent class React component already has a render function, but we're going to update it to have what we want to happen. And we're going to return some JSX, because really what's happening is that there's all sorts of stuff going on in that parent component. And when that component is used, it runs this render function to get the HTML that's supposed to be there. So return, okay, and it's going to return what's called JSX, which means we're going to put parentheses. And the easiest thing to do is create what's called a fragment. So you do react.fragment. You create this tag. And then you just put all your HTML that you want in here. So I could just put H1, hey there. And if you want to use any information that you passed in from your route, it gets passed in as what's in an object called props. Okay. So the way that you would work here is only one curly bracket instead of like 2 or 3. And then you would put this, because this is a class, so you always got to use this, dot props, so it's going to have this props object. And in that props object is our hello property that we sent over. Okay, and then that's it. Okay, that's kind of how JSX works. It's just basic HTML, except you always want to wrap it in this React fragment. It just helps avoid this other issue, so that way I don't have to get into some of the nuances of JSX. You'll just always avoid that by just having everything inside a React fragment, and you'll just never have to think about it. Okay, and then what you do is you do module.exports, because this is still Node. We're still in the back end, so things in the back end gets exported through module.exports, and we got to export that index component, because basically when we tell the view engine to grab from this file, it's going to grab whatever component we export. So we save. Okay, and that should do it. So let's see here. Let me just think. Is there anything we didn't do yet? No, I think we hit it all up. So I should be able to start the server now. Okay, that's giving me the port complaint again. So let me kill the port. Okay, port is killed. npm run dev. Now let's switch over to Chrome. Okay, to Chrome. We will go to this one. Okay, now we're going to refresh this. And now when I refresh, we should get, first the H1 that had, like, I think I said, hey there. And then below that should be hello world from our hello variable. And do we succeed? It worked. Yes. Okay. So basically what it did is it pulled it from that JSX file. Now let me show you how the other way you could have written that, because in React, there's 2 ways you could have done this. So let's go back to VS Code. And back to our index.jsx. The other way I could have written this component is as a function. So that would be, so there's a normal, so I just create a normal function, const index equals, because I have to pass in props as a parameter. That's where you have access to props. Okay, and then I can copy the JSX. I'm just going to do that. So, and whatever this function, you don't have to do a render function because you're in the function. So you just return. So whatever JSX your function returns is what shows up. So in this case, I'll just uncomment that out. The thing I have to change here is that it's no longer this dot props, because you're no longer in a class. It's now just props. That becomes props.hello. I hit save. Okay, now if I go back to Chrome, that should still work the way it was working. Okay, and actually I'm going to change it to hey there too. Just save the file real quick, just so that way we can see that there is a difference. That it still reloaded it, still worked. And there it works. So those are the 2 different ways you could do it. You could do it as a function. And I'll just stop my screen, go back to VS Code for a second. Let you guys take a look at that. Okay. So when you're writing React code, you could write a component as a function like this, which I generally prefer. I just think it's a little bit more cleaner. Or you could write it as a class like this. Either way works. Okay. It gets you where you need to get to. It's all a matter of personal preference, really. But with that, I think that's a good tour of different view engines. There are more. There's like Pug. There's actually a something like this, like Express React Views for like Vue. There's probably one for like Angular, so that way you can use those syntax in the back end. I think there's one for Svelte. So whatever your preferred syntax is for templating, you should be able to find a view engine to connect to Express. And that generally goes for a lot of backend frameworks. Some backend frameworks may only have one option when it comes to templating, but the idea is there's always some sort of a view engine, some sort of way to do a template. So basically what's happening here is that you're not sending back the user that EJS file, that handlebars file, that mustache file. What happens is on your server, your controller, your route takes that template, takes the data you send to the template, mushes it together, and creates an HTML file, and then sends that back to the user. That becomes the response that gets sent back. So that's what's referred to as server-side rendering. We're rendering the website from the server and then sending it back. Okay. And then if you want stuff to happen after the user receives it, then you would have to do that in your client-side JavaScript. So hopefully that was informative. My name is Alex Merced. Let me see if there was any comments first. Nope, I didn't see any comments or questions to answer. So I'm going to call it a day. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.